Welcome to this lecture series on the age of progressive reform. This is part one, settlement houses. Now, the core reason that the populist movement failed was it was trying to revolutionize the existing system. If you remember, it was trying to replace capitalism. It said capitalism doesn't work, we need to throw it out, we need to replace it with a cooperative economy. And as the election of 1896 showed, that was just too radical of a change for even the people that it would have helped to accept, right? Change is a very frightening thing, and it was just too much. So the populist movement died, but from that you'll have the rise of progressivism. And progressivism is a little bit different because it's not about revolution, it's about reform. To define progressivism during this time period, the definition would be the belief that you could use science, social sciences, and technology to address the problems of the day by reforming, not revolutionizing, the existing systems, right? So you use science, technology, and social sciences to address the problems of the day, but not by revolutionizing, but by reforming the current systems, okay? That's a little bit easier for people to swallow, right? Because you're not talking about throwing capitalism out. Progressives aren't saying, let's get rid of capitalism. They're saying, let's make capitalism work for the laboring class, right? Theodore Roosevelt described the movement by this. He said, this new movement proposes to put at the service of all of our people the collective power of the people through their government agencies. Now, Theodore Roosevelt is going to be the first of the progressive presidents, okay? Henry Demarest Lloyd, that muckraker that wrote that expose on Standard Oil, is actually going to travel around the world collecting ideas from Europe and Australia, and Asia on the progressive movement, right? Progressivism is a global thing. Even Pope Leo XIII is going to get in on this. In 1891, he's going to write an encyclical Rerum Novarum of New Things, in which he says, we clearly see on this there's general agreement that some opportune remedy must be found quickly for the misery and wretchedness pressed so unjustly on the majority of the working class. The foremost duty, therefore, of the rulers of the state should be to make sure that the laws and institutions, the general character and administration of the Commonwealth shall be such as of themselves to realize the public well-being and the private prosperity. Right? So this is something that's really going to catch on. Now, I want to make one final note here before we move in and take a look at some of the first progressive movements of this time period. Progressivism is used a lot today, and the thing that always astounds me is just how poorly that word is used. When Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump in 2016, she kept talking about being progressive by carrying on the existing policies of Barack Obama, and that's not what progressivism was. And I kept feeling like Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride. I kept saying, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means, right? Progressivism is something that does get misused by politicians a lot these days, right? Think of the definition. Using science, technology, and social sciences to address the issues of the day by reforming the current systems, right? So when they say that, make sure that that's actually what they're saying. Also, you need to realize, too, progressivism doesn't mean good or bad, right? We give this positive connotation to it, but think about some of the things that were progressive that really didn't work out that well. For example, prohibition, right? We'll talk about prohibition later. Prohibition was a progressive idea, right? We are going to moderate American morality, and it didn't work out, right? The eugenics movement, right? This idea that you could breed out human impurities, if you will. Honestly, even the Holocaust in Germany was a progressive idea. Think about it. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were using science, technology, and social science to address what they viewed as their problems of the day by reforming their existing system. And of course, as you know, that had some pretty catastrophic effects. So let's take a quick look at some of these progressives from the progressive era. We usually mark the progressive era from 1900 to about 1920. And when we look at the progressives of this time, there's a stereotypical progressive. And so I'm going to start with Jane Addams because she actually fits the entire stereotype of the progressives of that time period, right? Now realize, this is a generality, but in general, the majority of progressives during this time period were middle class or upper class, right? The majority of them were white, and the majority of them were women. And Jane Addams fits all of those bills. Remember, like I said, not every progressive was that, but the majority of them were. Jane Addams was from a wealthy family in Illinois. After she finished finishing school, she went on a tour of Europe, and she began to adopt some of the progressive ideas that were already circulating there. In London, she went to a place called Toynbee Hall. Toynbee Hall was a settlement house, right, to help the working class in the industrialized areas of London, right? And she really liked the idea of this. This Toynbee Hall was designed to help the working class, with things like, daycare for their kids, a place to live, a place to get educated. It was a form of charity, right? And it was kind of charity that she could buy into, because Jane Addams had an issue with charity back in the United States. Charity in the United States was predominantly driven by the church. Okay, it was religious. Okay, and that's still true today, right? You see a lot of religious denominations have charitable movements. Okay, but she felt that that charity shouldn't be religious based; that it should be secular, because she felt that religious charities tended to be too judgmental. Who were they to decide who the deserving poor was? And so when she came back to the United States, she decided to take that idea of Toynbee Hall, the London settlement house, and apply it to her hometown of Chicago, Illinois. And from that, we end up getting Hull House. So in 1889, in Chicago, with the help of another progressive reformer named Ellen Gates Starr, Jane Addams is going to found Hull House in the 19th ward of the city. Okay. The 19th ward of Chicago was a densely populated immigrant community that was made up of Italian, Germans, Greeks, Bohemian, Russians, and Polish immigrants, right? Now, the Hull House is a secular system that created programs to help the people in this neighborhood, right? It's going to establish a kindergarten for these working parents, also daycare facilities for really young children. It's going to create the first playground ever built in the city of Chicago. Playgrounds is actually a progressive movement that we'll talk about later, right? It provided an employment bureau, an art gallery, libraries. It taught classes to these immigrants in things like English, theater, art, music, and most importantly, citizenship. A lot of these people are working on becoming American citizens, so there's classes to help them accomplish that. At its height, the Hull House is going to reach 13 buildings in the 19th ward and provide clubs and events, and several prominent reformers are going to go through the Hull House, ones that are more notable later, like Dr. Alice Hamilton, Julia Lathrop, Grace and Edith Abbott, and one that we'll talk about here in just a second, Florence Kelley, right? Now, this movement is really going to catch on, not only in Chicago, but in the United States, right? By 1911, there's 34 settlement houses just in Chicago alone. And settlement houses have popped up in every single major city in the United States. So this idea of this secular program to help local urban communities is really going to catch on. And to give you an example of this, let's take a look at one of the Hull House veterans, Florence Kelley. So Florence Kelley is going to be one of those responsible for the spreading of the progressive movement in the settlement house movement in the United States, but she'll begin here at Hull House. She'll move into the Hull House in 1891 when she was fleeing from an abusive husband. She'll meet Jane Addams and they'll become fast friends, right? In 1895, she's going to get a law degree from Northwestern University Law School. And she's going to be very active in the Hull House community. Matter of fact, she's going to help the Department of Labor develop the demographics of the Chicago 19th Ward that today we refer to the Hull House as the Hull House maps, right? This is how we know that demographic breakdown that we talk about, okay? But she was also very active in trying to protect women and children in labor, right? She was, for example, she's going to found the Illinois Women's Alliance, which is an anti-sweatshop campaign to try and help women who worked in these sweatshops, right? In 1893, she's going to help get legislation passed through the Illinois state legislature to restrict child labor to those only over 14 years of age, right? Remember, up to this point, child labor, you had to be 9 years old. That was the only law in the books. You had to be at least 9. The progressive movement is going to make some inroads against child labor. They're not going to eliminate it, but they'll at least make some inroads, and this is an example of that. She'll also form the Illinois Consumers League with the help of Ellen Hinroten. This is going to be a anti-sweatshop league and an anti-child labor league, right? When she moves out of Chicago, she is going to establish herself in a settlement house in New York City, right, called the Henry Street Settlement House. And there, she is going to become, she's going to take the Illinois Consumer League, and it's going to become national. It's become the National Consumer League, and she'll be the secretary of that organization from 1899 until her death in 1932. The National Consumer League is actually going to begin a program called the Consumer White Label Program. And this is how it worked. If you were a company that obeyed all existing factory laws on the books, did not employ any children under 16 years of age, and did not demand mandatory overtime for your employees, you would be given a little plaque called the Consumer's White Label plaque that you put on your factory fence or your storefront window. Why would this be useful? Well, it's a message to the public, right? You're saying, look, we're one of the good guys, right? We are following all the laws. We are not employing children, things like that. And so it's kind of like today you may see a Better Business Bureau sticker on a storefront and you think, oh, wow, that's a good business. It's been accepted by the Better Business Bureau. This is the same kind of thing, right? It's a way to send a message out to the public that you are on their side.